What I love that the character Bob did was he decided to go first. Everything around him got dark when it came near his presence, but I actually think that was a metaphor. He believed that he was a burden to everyone he came in contact with. Isolation is so dangerous because all we have is our own thoughts. As long as we keep things hidden in the dark, we cannot heal from them. We are not the sum of our pasts or the mistakes that we have made. We all have a past, we all have shame, we all have regrets, and yet we can still see the good in the people around us because she chose to walk through the mess with him no matter the cost. And what's so powerful about this is, okay, I just saw the Thunderbolts movie and had no idea how deeply it would impact my soul. So I'm gonna explain why in this episode. By the way, there's spoilers all over the place, so if you haven't seen it yet, watch the movie first, then come back here. For everyone that's new here, welcome back to Accidentally Intentional, where we are on a mission to destroy loneliness by building rich, meaningful friendships. I just got out of the Thunderbolts movie and was so blown away by what the actual message of the film was. It was not just a regular, exciting action movie, but there was a much deeper through line and meaning behind it all. So I'm gonna give you my reaction to all of it. So early on in the movie, we meet the character Bob.
Who are you?
I'm Bob. I told you. Yeah.
And Yelena.
Okay.
And they have a dialogue that was super interesting when they're in the secret place. I don't know what it's called. Okay, but they have this dialogue where Bob asks Yelena, what do you do when you feel so alone? He says something like that. And her response caused a chuckle from both of them because she said, you just shove those feelings way, way down and don't address them at all.
What do you do about it?
You shove it way down. You just push it down.
And they both laughed. But what's ironic is that they were both doing that. Like they knew it wasn't right to be suppressing their feelings of isolation and loneliness, but yet here they were both doing it. But it was this really interesting moment. We got to see this beginning of a built connection that these two were having just because Bob had the bravery to ask such a vulnerable and relatively personal question to someone that he didn't know at all. So what I loved that the character Bob did was he decided to go first and build that bridge for connection by asking that question. And as a result of him being vulnerable, Yelena ended up having this strong desire to protect him for the rest of that scene in order for them to get out of the secret place where they were being held. And I feel like that's really important because later on in the movie, when they exit the place and Bob gets shot down, or what we think everyone at that moment thinks he's dead, Yelena looks incredibly saddened and distressed. And this is a stark contrast to all of the other Avengers in the vehicle with her because they don't really care. They're just like, okay, whatever. But because they had built that rapport and had that conversation, there was more meaning for her and her relationship with Bob than the rest of them. I thought it was really important for them to highlight that because we start to get the sense that Yelena is a lone ranger and it really is wearing on her soul for doing this. So here she had just kind of built this relationship, had this new friendship dynamic going with Bob, and all of a sudden she thinks he's gone. So this is a pattern we continue to see. And then later on in the movie, Yelena and her dad have a fight where she kind of blurts out her frustration with him. And the crux of her frustration with him is that she feels abandoned by her dad, that he hasn't even reached out to her. They haven't even seen each other or talked to each other for a year. And so that loneliness inside of her is starting to bubble up and go all over the place. And though she didn't have the right approach in that conversation with her dad, it ended up bringing to the surface an issue that they both had in order for them to work it out.
If you cared, you would have called. I would have heard from you.
I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this. I didn't think you wanted me.
You did.
I'm late. What time? I'm here now.
Daddy, I'm so alone. I don't have anything anymore.
And throughout the film, as I was watching, I kept thinking of this ancient proverb which says, those who isolate themselves seek their own desire, they break out against all sound judgment. The through line of the film is loneliness destroys people, and that connection is so incredibly necessary for human flourishing. Then throughout the movie, we're seeing this really interesting dynamic and character arc of Bob, who we can gather deals with depression and a slew of other things that they don't directly name, but we know that he has sought medical intervention, and I believe that they teased out the fact that he had been taking prescription medication as well for this. So when that proverb talks about breaking out against all sound judgment, we see that actually becoming played out in the film, and we just see how dangerous isolation really is. As Bob turns into Sentry and then goes into dark mode, as I'm describing it, the darkness becomes very dangerous. And what I found really interesting in this part after Sentry goes dark is that his darkness infected, in a way, it seeped into other people's lives. At least that's what the portrayal was of what was going on. Everything around him got dark when it came near his presence, but I actually think that was a metaphor. I don't think that it meant he turned everyone else's lives dark, but rather in his perspective and how he perceived everything, he believed that he was a burden to everyone he came in contact with. And because of that, he felt that he cast a dark shadow into everyone else's lives. And that's why isolation is so dangerous, because all we have is our own thoughts, because we're not letting other people necessarily come in. But that being said, it took one person to choose to walk into the darkness with Bob / the Sentry for everything to change, and to remind Bob that he was in fact not a burden. There's this passage in scripture that says, what is hidden in the darkness will be brought into the light. And I bring that up because I think it's a really profound principle to think about, regardless if faith is something that guides your steps or not. As long as we keep things hidden in the dark, we cannot heal from them. And if we keep things hidden in the dark, then how we connect with others is inherently limited, which brings this whole concept of shame rooms that they show in the movie to the forefront of this conversation. And I thought the shame rooms were incredibly powerful in how they represented this whole dynamic. So the concept of the shame rooms happened when someone came in contact with Bob's / Sentry's darkness. They would have to confront their past when they came in contact with the darkness, and not just confront their past. Ultimately, they had to go through their past. What makes this whole thing so powerful is Yelena decided to go into the darkness, confront her shame room, and walk alongside Bob through his. And that, in my opinion, embodies an incredible friend, is someone who is willing to walk with you through the highs and the lows, through the light and the darkness, believing that you will get through it, and they're going to stay by your side the whole way through, and they believe the best in you, even in spite of them seeing the worst about you. Yelena believed so much in what Bob was capable of due to her limited interactions with him earlier in the film, that she was willing to take the risk of going through it with him, not knowing what would come on the other side of it, because she chose to walk through the mess with him no matter the cost. And what's so powerful about this is once Yelena was let into Bob's shame room, she was able to get a deeper understanding and perspective as to what his entire life was about and how he saw the world differently from other people. This obviously plays a huge part in the heroic arc of the movie, because it all has to do with someone else being a different voice in his life, his mind, in his ears, obviously, too. And we see that he struggles with this because there's a lot of lies that Bob is telling himself throughout the movie. We also see this earlier in the film when basically he is put to the test of needing to fight the other Avengers who saved him earlier in the movie. Now, what's so interesting is he actually says that they turned their back on him, but that undeniably was not true. They were forced to turn their back on him through his perspective because he was forced to fight against them. That was never their intention. They tried to speak life into Bob by saying, "You don't need to do this. We know who you really are." Comments like that to speak to the potential that they all saw in him, but he couldn't be deterred because of the lies that he was believing. And so once the shame room element of the movie happened and other people were given access and permission to speak into him, that's where everything started to change. So back to Yelena and Bob being in the shame rooms together. She now has a deeper context about him, and at the same time, it made her feel less alone because she had to enter a shame room too, and she suddenly had somebody else in the room with her, which is Bob. As we're realizing that we aren't really alone in these moments, in these shame rooms, if we let other people in, that's when the dynamic of our lives begins to change and we begin to find healing and freedom. And then one of the final scenes of the movie was so powerful that it brought me to tears when it's the ultimate showdown between Bob and his dark side. Once he is fighting himself at the end, it's parallel to the voice we have in our head that really is the most powerful thing sometimes if that's all we're listening to. If we start telling ourselves lies for so long that they become truth, then it becomes louder and drowns out anything else that could actually be true. For instance, telling ourselves that we are a burden, people don't like us, we're gonna be rejected, all of these lies that we tell ourselves, if we don't let people in, then we default to believing what's not true and making that true instead of the actual truth that none of us are a burden. We're created for connection. You are worth building incredible friendships and truths like that. We are not the sum of our pasts or the mistakes that we have made or the current life circumstances we find ourselves in. We are not the sum of that. That is part of us, but that is not the whole of us. And if you're watching this right now and you don't believe that's true, then I'm going to act like the Avengers in this case and believe it for you and tell you until you choose to believe it for yourself. Only because Bob let the Avengers into the ultimate shame room with him was he able to overcome it. But we know it didn't happen easy like that. In fact, he almost didn't overcome it. So let's break down what happened in that climactic scene. First off, we watch the dark version of him basically shun any other voices and help so that the lies can be the loudest speaking to Bob. So as a result, the rest of the Avengers are chained up watching the darkness begin to overtake Bob as he's fighting the darkness. And they refuse to sit back and just watch it happen. They decided to confront his darkness too by coming towards him, breaking off the chains that were holding them back because they believed in who he was and who they saw him to be. And I can't hit on this part enough because they saw both sides of him and they chose to, in spite of that, still believe the potential in who he was, even though at the time, the darkness was all that was around them. And it's not lost on me that all of them had to confront and go through their own shame rooms ultimately to get to Bob, which is such a powerful concept because true friendship is where people can honestly and openly share their scars and their joys together and equally. See, the shame rooms equaled the playing field for everybody where they came to realize that the shame rooms weren't the sum total of them. Yes, it gave a context for how they turned into who they became present day, but it equaled the playing field because everyone realized, oh wait, we all have a past, we all have shame, we all have regrets, and yet we can still see the good in the people around us. And therefore they all realized together that they were capable of walking through their past and overcoming it together. So this really ties the whole narrative of the film being about connection, being incredibly powerful and changing everything around us. Because of the power of connection and because of people speaking life into Bob and encouraging him and literally staying with him, walking through everything with him, they helped him defeat not only the personal darkness, but the darkness that was happening everywhere around them too. And so if you're watching this right now and you feel like the darkness is overtaking you, I am here to tell you that you are worth bringing it all into the light, and that the darkness that you currently feel does not define you, and it is not the sum total of you. Yes, we all have shame rooms, and yes, we all walk through darkness, but you should not, and you are worth more than walking through it alone. And I know that we can tell ourselves like, nobody can understand me. Like, I cannot tell anybody this because they will run the other way. They will be scared of me. They will ba, 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 ba. Here's the thing. Connection, friendship, it's all a risk. And as that movie showed, it's a risk worth taking because Yelena was willing to risk it all, not knowing what was going to happen when she walked into the darkness. She helped Bob overcome his. And as a result, everyone else overcome theirs too. And I just believe so deeply in the power of connection. And I understand how hard life is right now and how distrusting some people can be and how painful it is if you've been betrayed before and you have pain that you're holding on to. I get it. I've gone through multiple betrayals in my life, and I know that the handful of people that betrayed me are not the sum total of everybody on earth. Just because someone betrayed me doesn't mean the next person will. Is it a risk? Yes, but it's a risk worth taking. And so I love this concept that the film brought out of exposing the darkness in our lives so that we can find freedom and find the light on the other side of it. Because as long as we keep it hidden, it's going to impact our lives. It changes how we think about things. If we feel like we always have to hide something, we're never going to find true connection. And that movie proved that in our own lives, we all have shame. And that's what makes us human. That's expected. That's expected that you have regrets, that you have pain, that you have shame from things you've done, said, thought. And that's not the whole of you. So I loved this movie so much because of the profound impact that it speaks to of being able to walk with people through everything and the power of connection and the power of going first. Asking that simple question that Bob said earlier in the film of, what do you do when you feel so alone? Or something like that. I can't remember the exact quote. But because he chose to be brave enough to ask a stranger that changed the entire trajectory of his life ultimately. And so I want to encourage you, if you're watching this, to pursue meaningful friendships. And if you have something that you have been holding on to that is true darkness in your life that you want to feel freedom for, then there's a couple options for you. I think therapy is an incredible resource. And before you're like, oh, please, that's for wackos. No. Therapy, if nothing else, is a place where someone gets paid to hold a safe space where nobody's going to say anything and literally keep a secret that you share with them. And I think that's incredibly powerful because that burden can be lifted off of you once you share it with somebody else. Yes, friends can hold that too. Is it a risk? Absolutely. But the more time you spend building and connecting with somebody else where you truly want to get to know their heart, it lays the framework for being able to have those meaningful friendships. I would also say attending a church and becoming part of a church community where people can share what they're going through and walk together in the form of a life group is also an awesome resource if faith is something that guides your steps. But at the end of the day, I want you to know that you can find freedom for the shame and the darkness you feel in your life, and as a result, find the meaningful connection that you've been searching for your entire life. So thank you to Marvel for creating this movie and exposing this issue that so many of us are going through. Know that I believe in you. You're worth building incredible, rich friendships. And I can't wait to see you back here in the next episode.